I wasn't planning on diving into the whole Diddy situation, but I came across a theory that, while controversial, really got me thinking, and I think it's worth our attention. So here's the question. Could male exclusive spaces be playing a larger role in all of this than we realize? By male exclusive spaces, I'm talking about anything from fraternities to secret industry networks, anywhere men gather without women. Think social clubs, friend groups. So the hypothesis is this. These spaces, which are meant to foster brotherhood and loyalty, often become places where men explore sexuality with each other. But instead of being safe and supportive environments, they can turn toxic where boundaries get crossed, coercion is normalized, and blackmail becomes a constant threat. Let's unpack that. The stats really back this up. 1 in 6 men will experience some form of sexual abuse before the age of 18. This isn't just happening to women, men are getting their boundaries violated too. And a lot of it happens in these all male environments where people think they're safe. And when it happens, they don't talk about it because of the shame and pressure to man up. So, the recent controversy surrounding P. Diddy and the allegations of abuse against him provide a stark example. So, hear me out. So many men are out here defending Diddy, saying stuff like, since when is it against the law to be a freak? Since when is assault and violence just freaky? That's straight up criminal behavior. The issue here is not consensual sexual expression. What's problematic is when someone's freaky behavior crosses the line into abuse. In Diddy's case, the allegations include kidnapping, assault, and violence, which are far beyond just being sexually adventurous. These are criminal actions. And this points to a broader issue, the normalization of boundary violations among men within their own male dominated spaces. So these fraternal settings, which are supposed to foster loyalty and trust, instead often serve as breeding grounds for coercion, manipulation, and blackmail. And if you step out of line or try to leave, they have dirt on you. Just as we hear about abuses happening in prisons, where men often violate each other's consent and use fear or intimidation to control others, similar dynamics occur within male fraternal organizations. The threat of having one's secrets exposed, particularly when it involves sexual exploration, becomes a weapon that some men wield over each other. And if you step out of line or try to leave, they have dirt on you. The problem is that these experiences of abuse and boundary violations don't stay contained within these male only spaces. They often spill over into relationships with women. Many men, having endured hazing, emotional manipulation, or worse at the hands of other men, attempt to replicate that same power dynamic in their relationships with women. This is why, for many women, dating can feel like a humiliation ritual. You ever notice how dating certain guys feels like psychological torture? That's because the same hazing, the emotional manipulation, the mind games they went through with their male friends is something they might start doing to the women in their lives, expecting women to endure emotional or even physical harm as part of their relationship dynamic. Take, for example, the numerous hazing scandals that have plagued college fraternities. According to research, 55% of college students involved in Greek life report experiencing hazing, and of those, 26% say they were subjected to activities involving sexual humiliation. That's not just hazing, that's trauma, and it sticks with these guys long after they leave college. And while these hazing rituals are framed as rites of passage, they often lead to lasting psychological trauma and establish a power dynamic where one group can later use these humiliating experiences to control or blackmail others. The Penn State hazing case, where a student died after a night of brutal hazing, is one such example. But beneath these stories of physical violence are often darker, unspoken experiences of sexual humiliation, which are rarely discussed publicly. In these fraternities, men are often coerced into acts that blur the lines between fraternity brotherhood and sexual dominance. If one of these men were to attempt to leave or expose the group, the threat of being outed for participating in these rituals often keeps them silent. We also see similar dynamics in elite professional organizations. Take Wall Street or the entertainment industry, for instance. In 2017, the Me Too movement exposed a toxic culture where men in positions of power coerced and abused others, often using their wealth and influence to silence victims. That wasn't just about sexual exploitation, it was about control, manipulation, and keeping others in a state of submission. But it's not just formal organizations. These patterns can be found in smaller, more informal male friend groups. A high profile example of this is the case of R. Kelly. R. Kelly's inner circle of male associates reportedly helped him carry out abuse for years. Why? Because they were benefiting from it or they were too scared to lose their place in his inner circle. It's all the same dynamics. In other cases, male groups act as enablers for one another's toxic behavior. Remember the infamous case of Steubenville, Ohio, where a group of high school football players assaulted a girl at a party while their male peers not only watched but filmed and mocked the assault? This kind of groupthink reinforces the idea that boundary violations are acceptable, or at the very least can be ignored for the sake of brotherhood. One of the most concerning aspects of this issue is how these abusive dynamics between men often spill over into their relationships with women. Many men who have been hazed or abused within male groups later replicate those patterns in their romantic relationships. The abuse and humiliation they endured becomes normalized, and they project that trauma onto women. For example, many survivors of domestic violence report that their male abusers display patterns of control and humiliation that mirror the kinds of toxic behaviors found in these male spaces. Like the processes get exported into their romantic lives. This explains why, for some women, dating can feel like an emotional humiliation ritual, a pattern that mimics what men themselves experience in male only spaces. Let's talk about football player Ray Rice, who was caught on video assaulting his then fiance. In the NFL, stories of physical and emotional abuse against women are tragically common. Many of these athletes come from locker room cultures where hypermasculinity and domination are celebrated. Ladies, if your dating experiences feel like you are constantly being tested, humiliated, or forced into compromising positions, it may be because your partner is reflecting the same abuse he experienced in his male only circles. So, even beyond fraternities, we see these toxic dynamics in other male dominated spaces. Don't even get me started on the military, because in the military, where hypermasculinity is celebrated, 38% of male survivors of sexual assault report that they were assaulted by other men. The problem is so big that 80% of male military sexual assault victims never report what happened to them because of fear, shame, or retaliation. Can you imagine what kind of baggage they carry when they come home? The military issues with assault are often framed in terms of male on female violence, but male on male assault is also rampant, though it is less frequently discussed. In these hypermasculine environments is often a way to assert dominance. And as in fraternities, the threat of blackmail can prevent men from coming forward. Even in prison, where sexual violence is rampant, it's estimated that 4.5% of male inmates report being sexually assaulted by either fellow inmates or staff. But let's be real, that number is probably way higher because most guys aren't going to admit it, and the culture makes it impossible to speak out. And many former inmates describe how sexual assault is used as a form of control and punishment within the prison system. This dynamic is not unlike what we see in other all male spaces, a place where power is established through dominance and sexual coercion. So, in conclusion, it's time that we start questioning the dynamics within male dominated spaces and the impact they have on both men and women because they don't stay contained within those spaces. And as a society, we need to encourage healthier models of male bonding, ones based on mutual respect, clear boundaries, and emotional vulnerability. Until we do so, the cycle of abuse that begins in these fraternal spaces will continue to reach into the lives of women and perpetuate harm on a broader scale. Once again, thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. And click the little bell to be notified of new updates.